Hello, I'm Violet Manners, and welcome to Hidden Heritage, the podcast that brings you inside Great Britain's favourite destinations, with help from custodians, historians, artisans, and experts. Today on Hidden Heritage, I am joined by the CEO of Visit Britain and Chair of the Tourism Industry Emergency Response Group, Patricia Yates. So today is such an exciting day for us here at Heritage Explore. Not only is it the first of many Heritage Explore podcast episodes, but we are finally launching our new online platform, Heritage X, for independent heritage across the UK. And I can think of no better place to record our first episode than in the magnificent Georgian Society building in London. What a way to remind our guests of the beauty and importance of living heritage. So, to start off our first episode, we're delighted to welcome someone who is going to help put the British heritage and tourism industries into perspective for us today. I'm joined by the brilliant CEO of Visit Britain, Patricia Yates. Patricia has been the CEO of Visit Britain and Visit England since 2022, working with organisations from across the tourism industry to grow British tourism and celebrate its role as a major economic contributor. She is also the chair of the Tourism Industry Emergency Response Group, which coordinates the tourism industry developing plans and responses during specific crises. You must have been very busy, Patricia, in COVID. Patricia, it's such a pleasure to have you at the microphone with me here today, and thank you so much for making the time, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Patricia, could you just start off by explaining a bit about what Visit Britain is and its vital role in supporting the tourism industry in this country and, of course, abroad?
Visit Britain is the National Tourist Board by any other name. So we exist to promote Britain in international markets. We have offices in around 16, promoting in around 20 countries overseas, really competing for that tourism dollar, pound, yen, and telling people that Britain is the best destination in the world to come to. We do that by amazing advertising campaigns. We're part of the Great Campaign, talking about seeing Britain differently. And we also work with the travel trade, on that very practical, getting the trade in international markets to actually sell Britain. And our role there is getting people to come at different times of year. Many places can fill their beds in July and August. They don't need our help, but getting them in October and March is a different story. And of course, getting visitors to spread out right around the country. About 50% of our visitors do not go outside London. So you just think what they're missing and not exploring more of the country.
It's so true. And I think I've read that on Visit Britain, sort of various reports that you've done. And it's been so interesting to think that, because I've spent the last 6 months traveling around the country, visiting so many of these incredible historic houses. And yeah, you're so right to think of what's being missed by virtue of just maybe not knowing about it or not being aware of how easy it is to get there by virtue of our brilliant railway systems and much else is staggering.
It is. And I think it's exactly as you say, it's two things. It's the aspiration, why should I go? And that's the story we all need to tell. And then it's the practical, how do I get there? How do I book tickets? Which I know is centre of the work you're doing. But those two things to really tell our story and make our history and heritage, really deliver for international visitors.
Yeah, because I don't think many people will know this, but tourism is such a fundamental part of the UK's wider economy. It's worth, I think I'm right in saying, 127 billion and supports 3.1 million jobs and over 200,000 small and kind of medium enterprises across the UK. I mean, it's huge. And I think heritage tourism, I'm right in saying, is worth 45 billion. So, it's such staggering numbers, it's kind of hard to believe. But yeah, it's integral to this country.
It's integral to this country. You think what it was like in COVID when there were no visitors.
Yeah.
And it just felt different, didn't it? Seeing empty streets and attractions and restaurants all shut. We exist, the vibrancy of our towns and cities and our countryside is in part fueled by having those visitors who go have a wonderful time and spend money as well. And of course, that delivers jobs, it delivers economic growth right across the country, and tourism is a real enabler of that.
And I guess just circling back to you as well. So did you, how did you get into, being the CEO of Visit Britain, and what was your journey in getting there?
Goodness, I mean, I have sorely drifted. So I went to Oxford and read atomic and nuclear physicist. So I'm a nuclear physicist, really.
Oh my gosh, that is so badass. That's amazing.
And then there's applied to work for the Ministry of Defence. So there's all security clearance, which takes forever. And in the meantime, I'd applied for a job in scientific publishing. And then I sort of went through that, thought I really want to travel, moved into travel, worked on Holiday Witch for years, which is a really good grounding in what people want. You know, you really get a feel for consumers, and actually political lobbying as well. How do you get politicians to change their mind? And that importance of getting data and a good story if you want to make policy interventions.
Because Holiday Witch was or is, sorry, forgive me.
It's Witch. So it's part of the Witch stable.
Yeah, okay,
so
fine.
it's their holiday part. So telling the truth in travel, but also lobbying, on safety things like the Herald of Free Enterprise and ferry safety and safety of young people at adventure centres. It was all that sort of stuff.
I see. Yeah. Fascinating. That really is a good grounding for what you've gone on to do. I guess most countries across Europe have got, fabulous buildings and incredible architecture, history, collections, stories, much like us. But it's really interesting. I think I've been saying, as part of sort of building out Heritage Explore and what I envisaged it becoming, and really what sparked the inspiration for it, was seeing that our heritage has been enjoying a real renaissance, I think, post-COVID, and, the rise of sort of period drama across our sort of silver screens has been really fascinating to just observe and watch from the sidelines. I don't know if you've recognised or witnessed that yourself as well, but I think that was such a sort of seed of inspiration for me in bringing Heritage Explore to life this year.
No, I think it is. And yes, other countries have history and heritage, but what do we have? We have that real breadth and depth. And we have culture that spans, thousands of years. I think the people as well, starting with the royal family, with the king opening up Balmoral to visitors. So you have houses that people have lived in. So it's not just a story of the past and amazing paintings. It is a story of what does it feel like? I remember my young son going to Alnwick Castle, and you go in the library and there's the drinks trolley with the Coca-Colas on it for the children.
Yes.
And it's just that sense of a living place where families go. And I would say, on our competitive nature, I think Britain's history and heritage, its historic houses owners, have been really good at thinking about the visitor experience, and how do you tell that story to a new audience?
So true. And I think that's what's really struck me, having, spent lots of time traveling around the country, as I said. It's incredible to see the kind of investment that's going in, on these estates to ensure that they are not just historic, but actually is seen as somewhere that you can enjoy in the moment, in the now, as something that, as you've said, is living and breathing. It's not a relic. It's not a fossil. There are many things that you can experience and explore and see that, signal to times that we can hardly imagine in many ways. Until you're in these buildings, you can hardly imagine. But it's the way that you're right, that they're investing in it in their futures.
Well, and I think as well, you see as the children grow up, they have different ideas of how they would like to do it, and where next month I'm going on a trade mission to Saudi and taking Muncaster Castle there, and the Frost Penningtons, the younger son, Ewan coming in there, and I think he's a bit nail biting at moments. He's just opening a sort of knight's experience there at the castle, where you can go and joust and learn to sword play in a day. So those new experiences that people don't just want to stand and look at beautiful buildings. They want to be part of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's also the rise of AI and the rise of, all these kind of amazing tools that are, I think there's such an interesting intersection as well as to how we can put history in individuals' hands and it make it far more interactive with certain tools that we're looking at and exploring with Heritage Explore and AI. It's such an interesting kind of moment in time, I think, at the moment, because you're right, people like you and they're such mavericks in how they're thinking about their heritage and how they want to take it into the future. And it's really exciting to hear that, he's one of the exports going out to Saudi as part of your big trade mission over there.
Yes, because, the all over the world, people are looking for people with talent and ideas about how do you engage in a world where there are so many things competing with people's time. So how do we tell our story, and how do we really get people to want to come here, that aspiration to come to Britain and to come now? Because if you talk to a lot of Italian cities, they'll say that they have real trouble, that they're sort of seen as the place you can go now or you can go in 10 years' time. The history will always be there. So that driver to make it a place that you have to see this year.
Yeah.
And you mentioned screen tourism. That is a real driver for people thinking, I have to go and see where this was shot and I have to see it this year.
I know. And I think you only have to look at the numbers. I think Bridgerton had 113 million views, and The Crown had 6.1 billion. And you think about, I'm fortunate enough, having gone to so many of these houses, to actually be able to sit in Bridgerton and watch it and say, oh, that's that house, that's that house. But I think the Bridgerton effect is a real thing. It's had such a phenomenal impact on that kind of younger generation, and really also broadening the appeal of heritage to demographics that perhaps have never thought to look at it as a space that they'd like to enter or explore and visit.
I think that's absolutely the case. And if you think of those new global platforms where we're reaching huge audiences, and different audiences, as you say. So I know Castle Howard, for example, had more than a 3,000% increase in younger people going to look after their website after they were featured. So it is such a strong driver. More than half the people that come to Britain are coming here because they've seen something on screen that makes people want to travel. And that's why we're so excited. We're just shooting our film that's going to be called Starring Great Britain, to tell that story of Great Britain on screen. And really, it's one of our great success industries. Tying that up with tourism, to another great success story, is a real opportunity for Britain.
Hugely. And I can imagine at Visit Britain, your role must encompass and extend so far beyond just the historic houses and heritage. I imagine there's sort of lots of other sort of areas that sit within that, within your role and within Visit Britain.
Yes, I mean, the great thing about Britain is that you've got history and heritage and you've got modern culture as well. So yes, we can do fashion, we can do music, local food, so that the sustainability story and going local. Britain has just come on leaps and bounds. And then there are things that are just so traditionally Britain, like going to the pub or having afternoon tea or having fish and chips at a seaside resort. So there's lots of great stories that you can tell there.
Yeah, so true. And I think something, you've talked lots about the role of sort of sustainability in tourism as well, and growing understanding, how do we create that sense of, we want that footprint in the UK, we want people visiting these places, but also how do we balance that with, carbon footprints and offsetting, and I think, it's so interesting to see. I've been looking, for example, at the English Heritage and Stonehenge and the amazing traffic that they've had in the last 3 years in particular, and particularly during COVID. But there's always that tension, isn't there? You want people in the country, you want them to be going to these buildings. And then there's that sense of restoration, preservation, that's sort of, again, woven, between the lines of heritage that are kind of, it's always a balance.
There is always a balance with heritage. There are some places, quite a few, in number, places that are overwhelmed with visitors. There are many places that are desperate for visitors, and are desperate for visitors at different times of year. So our job is to get people not just to the honeypots, not just in London, but to get them out, spread people around the year, and really encourage people to stay longer and immerse in a local area. And of course, to get the most spend from our visitors. So, houses that are putting on different sorts of attractions or different experiences that people can pay to be part of. We see no reluctance for people to pay to be part of that. And you can see, with the Balmoral tours, how quickly they sold out, that people will pay for something that's deeply personal and a personal experience when they go.
Yeah. And that's what I'm so excited about with what we're building, because as I was saying to you just before we sat down to speak, but it's, there's so much going on. It's about, from my point of view, I just remember thinking there's so many amazing places. There's so many amazing events happening, Muncaster Castle and many, many, many others. How do you know and how do you find that? And actually Visit Britain has been such an amazing resource for sort of understanding the myriad of things that exist in this country that you can go and see, as is Visit England's website. And I think, it's being able to have that kind of that map really sort of, populated to ensure that when people inbound or domestic are looking to do something, there's a platform there that's intuitive enough for them to figure it out quickly and easily and make their trip.
Yes, and I think we have a shop that we're just putting the British Rail Pass back in again for international visitors, so that's great to get people on the railways, because we as a domestic audience know you book in advance and you specify your tickets. If you're coming from abroad, you don't always know that.
Yeah.
So making rail more accessible to international visitors, and then how do you book, and your site that absolutely enables international visitors to book in advance, so they have that certainty and so they can plan and they can have a bit of fun planning their trip as well.
Yes, so true. What was your first brush? Did you grow up in London or did you grow up outside of it?
No, I grew up near Rochester Castle, so Rochester Castle and Cathedral. I would say my connection with history and heritage is quite a fun one. I've got two boys. We lived in Surrey, and as they were growing up, the years where they hit girlfriends, they would always take their girlfriends to Hever Castle, and they would tell the story of Anne Boleyn, which of course is wonderfully romantic at the beginning of the story.
And then really traumatic at the end.
And I was incredibly impressed with their knowledge in history, as were their girlfriends. So we did many trips to Hever Castle, and it's it gives me a warm feeling of that sort of family time.
That's very cool. What clever boys that you must have to know that's because that is probably one of the coolest and sexiest stories in history for a myriad of reasons, good and bad. But that's really fun that so that was your first brush with basically.
That was, and I would say brush. There are lots of places I still want to go and see. Yeah. So I haven't been to Muncaster Castle, so I'm expecting to go up there.
Yeah.
And Bishop Auckland, I mean, what a story that is.
Yeah.
And I would love to go and see some of that. We're doing a lot of promotion on the Northeast because it's an area that doesn't attract as many international visitors as you would want it to. So it is one of the more difficult to get to, and that joined up. How do people get around the region?
Yeah.
That I know the tourism leads there are really thinking about how you do. But I'd love to go and see Bishop Auckland. So still lots I want to see.
Yeah, I know. And I was in the Northeast recently and went up to Raby Castle, and Raby have just done an enormous amount of investment on the estate. They've sort of repurposed the coach house and they've turned it into the biggest indoor outdoor space in that part of the world. I think it seats or can hold at least 350 people. Outside of any city, that's the biggest space that you can host sort of beautiful weddings or events. And I think the investment that's what's really taken me back, actually, traveling around the country, is seeing, you're right, the way in which these places are really investing in the area, really investing in heritage and visitor tourism in a way that, I doubt when they first were sort of asked to open their homes in the 1950s, I don't think half of them could have envisaged where we'd be in 2024 and the volume of people that want to come and explore these places.
Yes, and when you talked about tourism, you talked about SMEs, and actually historic houses are part of that entrepreneurship, aren't they? And you can see from the amazing investment that's got in and the new things that are opening this year, but also the exhibitions that are on that really encourage people to go. I also want to go and see the fashion exhibition at Blenheim, of course.
I know. So, have you seen that?
I haven't seen it. No.
It's unbelievable. We've actually got Kate, the curator of that exhibition, coming on the podcast as well to talk to us, because that was a 5-year project, to get that exhibition curated in the way that it's been brilliantly done. And I'm yet to see it as well, but it's on my list. So we've got Kate, the curator from Blenheim, coming in just to talk about how do you, it's all those sort of funny, intricate details that I'm fascinated in, that I know, having grown up at Beaver, it's complex, marrying, these beautiful big exhibitions with big ambitions with rooms that were built, in the 1500s, and the lights don't always turn on in the way that you expect or would like them to, and the carpets are precious, and all those kind of funny details that are fascinating for, I think.
And I think historic houses have been really good at that old and new, haven't they?
Very.
And I went to Chatsworth earlier this year, and some of the work they're doing is very contemporary exhibitions and artists putting this amazing historic setting, and it makes you smile, and it brings it to life, doesn't it?
I completely agree. Patricia, why is it so important that British citizens make time, effort, energy to go and explore heritage across the UK?
Well, I'm also CEO of Visit England, which absolutely is there to promote the domestic industry. Why it's so important is actually it is still much bigger. There are far more of us than there are international visitors. And we're the people that support the industry year round, aren't we? By going out locally, by going to sites through the winter and through the Christmas season. So it's so important that domestic visitors do go out and support their local area. And I would say it gives a sense of our history and our common purpose by going to these places and understanding them and taking our children there so that they learn and can impress their girlfriends, indeed.
And of course, all of that secondary, everyone that goes to a historic house then also supports by virtue the local pubs, the local cafes, which is such a, part of our identity as a country as well. As you said, those wonderful pubs, those wonderful kind of characterful cafes and restaurants. So that's a really, that's a really good point.
So it's a really linked ecosystem, isn't it? That it's, the local B&B and the restaurant and the craft shops, as well as the historic houses. It's all part of placemaking.
Yeah. So true. So just giving us an insight into what's on the roadmap for you with Visit Britain in the year to come. I know we're in April already, which is terrifying, but there's a good few months ahead of us for the remainder of this year. What are you most excited about that's coming up?
Well, we're focusing our investment on the big markets that are coming at the moment. American market is just so strong for us. And we're told by the American industry that it will definitely continue to be strong this year because people don't tend to go to Olympic hosts. So they're steering their visitors away from France at the moment. That's a bonus for us. So America really strong. France and Germany, which are very much our traditional markets, we're facing more competition in Europe to get European visitors to come. And European visitors do tend to be very good at exploring well across the country. The GCC, really valuable markets, spend a lot when they come, very loyal as well, but of course competitive markets. And Australia, where we're seeing, with a slower opening than other markets, but the flights are back and Australian numbers are coming back very quickly. And again, they tend to spend a long time. So really focused on driving value back as quickly as possible. And then the big reveal on that is going to be our Starring Great Britain campaign, which is all about film and destination, and some of those wonderful opening out the scenes of films to really show the destination that lies behind that. And we've got a great film director, very well-known film director, who I can't announce yet, but we're very excited to have him being contracted to film that film. And then working with our major commercial partners, people like British Airways, that tell the story of the Britain brand abroad, but also, of course, sell the product. So making sure that it's not just about raising aspiration, it's getting people on planes, it's getting people in seats. So we've got a good year of doing that. We're running trade missions to the Middle East and to Australia and to America this year. So we're taking small businesses out, showing them what the business is like. And then we do an amazing event in January where we bring hundreds of buyers into Britain and take them all around the country and showcase Britain. So lots to see, actually.
Gosh,
a busy year.
That is a very busy year. That's so exciting, though. Wow. Is there anything else that you could tell us? I know you can't tell us the director of this really exciting new film that's being made for Visit Britain, but is there any other details that you can share with us?
Well, at the moment, we're going around getting rights from film studios. So people are being very helpful, and it's really good to see people saying, yes, we want to be part of promoting Britain, because our film industry is really strong at the moment. So it's all work in progress. So I can't give you much detail,
Fair enough.
but detail on that, I'm afraid.
And then I guess what would be really interesting, because you sort of sit, above so much, but obviously for the purposes of this podcast, we're specifically interested in heritage. So I guess what would be interesting to know is, you mentioned earlier Balmoral sold out like that, and that was announced, I think, last week. And it didn't surprise me for a second that it was sold out so quickly, because it's, I think, the first time that it's been open to the public. But are there any other sort of standout historic houses or gardens? You've touched on a few that you'd still like to see in your own right, but are there any others that come up time and time again with, within Visit Britain's sort of team operation as popular favourite?
I suppose the ones that are easily accessible from London.
Yes.
So places like Blenheim, who also do a great story on sustainability. So that connects with a younger audience and easy to get to by train. Bringing international buyers over is quite interesting where they want to go. So the Americans this year wanted to go to Wrexham because they've seen Welcome to Wrexham on their TV screens. There's obviously a sprinkle of stardust around it. And so they're looking in their programmes at building out a programme on Wales, because they can see those programmes are so popular that they can see that they can tell the story of a new part of Britain that people don't know so well, with the amazing outdoors and adventure tourism that you can do in Wales, and the new walking paths that you can find there.
So exciting. And that was what was when I was travelling up to Scotland. I recently just did 2 weeks in Scotland. I think travelling around, I haven't as yet watched Outlander, but I realised when I was travelling around so I went to Blair Athol, Inverary Castle, where else? Drummond, Castle Gardens, they all featured an Outlander. And I very quickly realised that A, I need to watch this series, and B, it's just really, again, interesting to see how, Outlander is the series that's put Scotland on the map, up in that part of the world in Scotland. And then, down here and in the Midlands, it's Napoleon, or it's, the new Napoleon film by Ridley Scott, or it's so interesting how these films and series sort of actually speak to different parts of the country.
Well, and I love telling the story of Napoleon and where that was shot, because of course there's always a friendly rivalry with the French. So to say, actually, it was Wilton House. Yes. I think you'll find. Morton. It wasn't shot in France. Yeah. So that's always a great joy. And I think I can remember my first film tourism was going to Lyme Regis, where for the French Lieutenant's Woman, where you had Meryl Streep standing on the cob. If you watch Wonka, you will have seen Timothy standing on that same cob in that film. So, are part of our history and heritage, and told again, relevant for a new generation.
So true. And I guess final question before, I've got 4 very easy kind of quick 5 questions, lots of which we've covered off, but quite fun to end with. But what do you hope for the heritage of our United Kingdom in its future? Where do you see heritage sort of 50 years from now, our heritage 50 years from now?
I think it's a core strength and will continue to be. And the trick is making it relevant to a new audience and not assuming that everyone knows British history.
So true. And that's actually, the reason, again, not to keep harping on about Heritage X, but I think what's so interesting is we've built Heritage X through the prism of that younger generation, because I know intuitively if there's too many clicks to check out, or if there's too many, if it's not put in front of me, and if it's not dissectable or digestible within sort of 5 minutes, I'm off and I'm on to the next thing. And I think, I think that's why I'm so passionate and so excited about the future.
I think that, I've been to Chartwell and Blenheim, and you don't need to tell me about Winston Churchill, and you don't need to tell baby boomers, but for our children, probably it's a whole different story.
Exactly. How do you make that feel still relevant to them and interesting? And I think that the innovation and investment that's going in around the country, and in our own way, we're going to try and shine a light on it, and very much, very, very much in tandem with hopefully great organisations like Visit Britain and Visit England and Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. So thank you so much, Patricia, for joining me. Now, the only quick fires, which we kind of have covered during the conversation, but were your favourite historic house, if you had to pick one. I have a feeling...
I'm going to say Hever.
Yes. Because of all those wonderful stories with your boys taking their girlfriends there for the first time. I love that so much. Favourite historic garden?
Again, because I know it well, Sissinghurst.
Okay, interesting. I need to look at that. And then historic house you'd like to see but haven't yet. I feel like Muncaster could be on the list.
I'm going to put Muncaster Castle there, yes.
That's a shout out to you, and make sure. And then favourite period drama, if you had to pick one.
Oh, I loved Bridgerton. Actually, I really did. I loved that combination of the old and the modern music and the way they did that. I thought it was really clever.
Me too. I really, really loved it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Patricia. It's been such a pleasure to meet you, speak to you, share a little bit about what Heritage Explorer is, and understand Visit Britain even more so, because I think it's one of those organisations that is so essential, and is a really exciting opportunity for us to share it with our audience as to what you do as the CEO. And it's clear to say, by listening to this conversation, that no day is probably ever the same, I can imagine, and you're constantly kind of across so many things. But thank you so much for the work that you do, and for sharing Visit Britain with us and what it does today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and it's always wonderful to be able to talk about British history and heritage. It is such a core part of our international offer, so thank you.
That's the end. Thank you so much, Patricia, for sharing your time and coming on the show Hidden Heritage. You can learn more about Patricia and Visit Britain by visiting their website at www.visitbritain.org. Goodbye, and see you on the next one.